All right, welcome back to Ducks and Pucks. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddy Jones. And we have an exciting show for you this week. We have tons and tons of Ducks news. Finally, the season's almost upon us. We had DSP get re-signed. We had some player injuries that happened. Some comments from Murray about the goalie situation. And, of course, the big news of Teemu's new book and his comments, which stirred up a lot of responses on social media, and that's what we're going to talk about first. And what do you think, Eddy, about Teemu's comments and his new book? A lot of fan reaction that I received against Boudreau, against Teemu, and just all over the place.
Yeah, I think it was to be honest, I think it's been blown way out of proportion. I think it's because it's Teemu and because it's his last season, and mainly because of the quote saying, he would if Bujo wasn't there or if they would had any other coach, he'd still be playing. I think that's one reason why it's been blown out of proportion. But not every player gets along with the coach, and usually you don't hear about it, or you sometimes hear about it, like Reimer and Carlisle in Toronto. You heard about it, and that kind of gets picked up, but not to the same degree. And Selanne just ripped on Boudreau in this book, and it could be for good reason. And I'm not picking any sides here. I think it's all a little blown up proportion, like I said. But yeah, there's not really much behind it. Like there's a lot of players who don't get along with coaches, and Solanne's one of them. And it's just because it's Teemu and because of his legacy with the Ducks, that it's coming out like this.
Yeah, I think the big thing too is a lot of people were surprised is the reaction I got that, okay, Teemu came out and said this whole, what the heck? Where'd this come from? But, I'm not surprised. And that's what I kept telling people. And they're like, well, why aren't you surprised? And it's if you follow his one of his sons on Twitter, he's blown up Boudreaux left and right in this past year's. Like I remember one of the tweets was something about, oh, Ducks send Boudreaux back to Norfolk as a joke, and then Teemu's son ended up deleting it because so many people got pissed off at him for sending that one out. And you know that his son's getting it from Teemu, so I mean, obviously there's some discussion there. He talks to his boys; they play hockey too. So to me, it wasn't a big deal or a big surprise. Either way, like you said, I think it was blown out of proportion. But I think it was just interesting to see people picking sides, and it's not about picking sides. This whole issue is about what's best for the Ducks, and they disagreed, Eddy. I mean, Boudreaux didn't think Selanne should be out there on the ice as much, and Selanne did, and that's really what it just comes down to.
Yeah, I'm looking at a little bit of a chart here, and his total average time on ice in the last few seasons. In 11-12, he had about 18 minutes, dropped off to 16 in 2012-2013. He was just over 14 last year. 3 minutes or 4 minutes is a significant drop, especially for a player. For most of his career, he's been a star guy. But it's like I don't know what they expect either. Solanne's 42, 43, so do you really think? And I know he expects to play and he wants to play, but do you really put him over every guy that we have out there? I know he wanted to. There was a quote from his book where he had an argument with Boudreau and in practice about how he never puts him on the ice when they play 5-on-3 or 4-on-4 or one goal behind. And it's not always the best situation to put a guy out there on a especially a 4-on-4 where the ice is more open. You want quicker guys out there. Yeah, like you're saying, I'm not surprised either. It always comes out where there's players who disagree with their coaches. So, but like I said before, I think just because it's Selanne, a lot of fans have become really passionate about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we can look at both sides of this argument and actually see valid points on both sides. I mean, I think Teemu, as some people have pointed out, I mean, obviously, like you're saying, you're up there, you're getting to your mid 40s. He's not as fast as he was. He's still fast. Don't get me wrong, but he's not as fast as he was. And he did turn over the puck a lot more. We saw this season. So as far as him not playing as much during the game, just 5-on-5, 4-on-4, whatever the situation was, I understand that part on Boudreaux's end. The only thing I would say for Teemu is, I could see his argument about wanting to play on the power play more because he was still effective on the power play. So I'm kind of split. I think that the way his ice time was managed during throughout a game, I think Boudreau was right on. I just would have liked to see him more on the power play, Eddie.
Yeah, I definitely think we could have used a spark on the power play. You saw that in the early part of the season. We weren't too good on it, so maybe putting Solani on the power play would have helped. But this is nothing new. It doesn't take a month to write a book. He's been writing for this a while, writing his book for a while. So he's obviously had problems with Boudreaux, and there's some quotes from the book that says, he's thought about leaving before, in '05 and other times where he's had problems with Brian Burke and other guys on the organization. And you see this with star players sometimes. No one's going to agree with everybody on the team. So I'm not too surprised. But yeah, I think what you're saying with the power play, maybe at least trying him out there would have been a good option. But I think Boudreaux manages ice time pretty well for a guy who is closing in on his mid 40s, and he's still playing 14 minutes a game. That's not too bad.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see any mismanagement of the time or anything like that, and I'm not, irritated with Boudreaux on that end. The only other kind of concern that came up with Boudreaux that a lot of people don't mention, and Eddie, you and I have talked about this before, is his relationship in Washington with Ovechkin, the issues he had there, the issues he had with Hiller too. What do you think about those situations? Do you think they're the same? They're different? As what's going on with Teemu right now and Boudreaux.
Well, I think any disagreement you've seen with players and coaches can be considered the same type of thing. Like we've mentioned over and over now that there's players who aren't gonna agree with the coaches with regarding the Ovechkin situation. Ovechkin's one of those players who he has a pretty big ego. He's noted for having a bad attitude where he does things don't go his way, and the coach doesn't cater to him. Then he's not gonna make it a pleasant time for that coach. I don't think it's because of Boudreaux. Obviously, Boudreaux's a strict coach, and you see that with the more strict coach you have, there's a lot more fallouts between players. But I don't know. I see some similarities in between it, and same with Hiller, and it's just the players who don't play aren't gonna like the coach. It's simple as that. I know when I've played soccer through my career, if a coach doesn't play me, I'm not too happy with the coach either. So if you're not gonna play, then you're not gonna like what the coach is doing. Hiller played for most of the season. I bet in the beginning of the season he was pretty happy with Boudreaux. He played well for the beginning part of the season, and then he gets benched, and Anderson and Gibson come in, and obviously he's not too happy anymore because he's not playing. And he mentioned that on Sportsnet, I think it was a couple days ago when the Selanne thing first blew up, that he near the end of the season when he wasn't playing and he thought he was playing well, and Boudreaux benched him, that his relationship with Boudreaux plummeted. So I think yeah, these are similar situations. And Solani just either doesn't like his coaching style and wasn't happy that he wasn't playing time, or a combined combining of these factors.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's just something that we don't see all the time too, Eddie, because like I mentioned in the post too, a lot of times the players aren't going to tell us what's really going on. They're not going to want to air out what's the argument in the locker room or what's going on between players. We get these very bland, vanilla answers, and I think that's why a lot of people, when they hear what Temu said, they're like, "Holy cow, this comes out," and I think, during the playoffs when he got benched, Tamu didn't really say a whole lot. He said, "Yeah, I'm disappointed. I wish I was out there." And then he came back out there for Game 5 against Dallas and played. And I give Tamu some credit there because he could have blown it up there and made it all about him. Obviously, he was pissed off, and I'm sure his close friends and family knew. But at least during that time, Eddie, he didn't go public and make it a big issue then, because I think then that would have been just very poor timing on his part when they were battling it out with Dallas and then the Kings.
Yeah, and going back to you get all these media trained answers now, so when something like this drops, a lot of it puts a lot of people off guard. And that's why I think with these books, sometimes they're just not the the best idea. The players, not like they need more money either, and I guess he just wants to tell his story. But there's some things you don't always have to include, and you see this a lot in autobiographies, and it's usually after the player's retired, and a lot of things come out that you've never heard of, and just there's a couple things that I've seen lately, not involving hockey, but with soccer, there's a couple players. There's a player who's retired, and it's come out, and he's bagged on the manager, and it's become a big story there too. And it happens all the time. You see it, and it's usually with these players who are, have a huge following on the team they're on, and it just becomes big news. And it really shouldn't be like it. I don't understand why these players have to, share some of these things in the book that it really isn't necessary, and it's just going to create controversy. And then moving on to the fact that he didn't say anything in the playoffs, I think that, obviously that's a good decision on his part to not bring it out at such an important time for the Ducks. But is it really, a much better time right now before training camp, or is any time even really a good time to just drop this on the team? He's retired now, and I get that he wants to tell his life story, but do some of these things, really need to be said to everybody? He could think these things, but there's some things you don't really have to put out there.
Yeah, I agree with you on that part. I mean, I'm glad that he's not coming back this year because I think that also would have created more problems. I mean, at least he said it in the off season and he's not coming back. Yeah, it is close to the beginning of the season, like you said, just with the preseason now upon us. So that's not good. But I think just all that stuff coming up and what he's saying there can cause some problems, like you had mentioned, as far as the relationship between the players and the coach. And I think that there's stuff like that that goes on. I honestly, some of the quotes, I didn't really have a problem with some of the quotes. I think the main one, and you and I hit on it before, Eddie, was the whole "I would have come back and played again if Boudreau wasn't there." That's the one quote that I think was probably the most, just showing of Teemu's frustration. I think of this last season, and I think if that was true, then he would have gone. He could have still gone to another team because he also talked about a quote was that he had talked about maybe going to the Kings or the Jets this last season, and he didn't. So he stayed loyal to the Ducks. He came back. He finished out the season. So I give him credit for that. I think that one main quote, Eddie, is probably one that he apologized later on. Don't forget that, everybody. He did go out and apologize, say he wasn't trying to be bitter, even though to me that one quote was one I think, Eddie, that he probably should have left out.
Yeah, I think it's written in anger, and obviously that's one that's stuck with a lot of people. But you got to think if he really wanted to play, there's 29 other coaches in the league that aren't Bruce Boudreau that he could have gone and played for. And I think if he went to Winnipeg, nobody would have been surprised. So unless he hates, unless he has a feud with the Winnipeg Jets coach as well, then there's no reason he couldn't have left and gone somewhere else if he really wanted to play this season. So I think that one's just written out of anger, and it's written in there really to cause controversy, as like it seems like that he had to have known that's gonna be something people are gonna look at in that quote. Maybe he didn't expect it to blow up like it has, but if he really wanted to play, he could have gone somewhere else. And like I said, there's 29 other coaches in the league. He could have easily played another season if he was up for it.
Yeah, and the other thing that some people brought up is okay, this might get lost in translation because this book was released in Finland in Finnish. I got a lot of the translations from that Finnish reporter that I put out on there. It's in the article, so there may be some of that, but the English version is not going to be. They said out till 2015, which I'm still going to go buy it and read it because I'm really curious to see. But like you said, sometimes things are said in books to sell books. I've read a handful of player autobiographies, and like you talked about some of the players saying things, and I think the one I read I couldn't believe was Shaquille O'Neal's book, where he basically just goes out there and slams every other center in the NBA. And it just, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't think Teemu went that route in his book. I don't think he probably slammed other people, but I just like you said, there's just certain things that it's a turnoff. When I read that, I'm like, I don't really care. Not to talk about basketball right now, but I don't care, Shaq. I really don't care if you thought you were better than all these other people. I just didn't think it was appropriate. in that context. So, like you said, Eddie, maybe when we get the English translation and we see some of the stuff, you know, I think there may be a couple of those quotes in there that maybe Temu just didn't want to have maybe in there, knowing now the reaction that he had gotten.
Yeah, but going just quickly, referring to the Shaq thing you said, I think you expect that from somebody like Shaq, the personality that he has. I think you're gonna expect that from somebody like that, but you don't really expect that from somebody so reserved like Teemu Selanne and who's regarded as being, one of the, classier, simple-minded players where he just like he doesn't say these things all the time. He's more quiet and he's reserved. So coming out with like these bombs and his autobiography, it's put a lot of people off guard and it's fueled the fire that's the story's become.
No, definitely. And then, that brings up the question. One of the fans had a question for us, and, kind of moving this forward now. Now we go forward. Tamu's retired. We're still going to have his retirement ceremony. I'm sure everything will be fine. But moving forward, we had one question from Wayne. He had asked, do you think that Boudreau forces out players such as Hiller, Winnick, Perot? With Solanne's opinion out, do you think other players that have played for Boudreau basically feel the same way? And what do you think about that, Eddie? Winnick's gone. Now Koivu's gone too. Perot's gone. Do you think that there's a pattern, or do you think this is just the normal course of business that we just don't hear about all the time?
Well, with the Perot situation, I think with the money he was asking, although not a high offer, but we brought in Kessler. Where does he really fit unless he's going to play third line center? And do you really want somebody who's making 3 million to play third line center? So I think with that situation, that was just because we replaced him and we brought in a better player. With Hiller, it's obviously he was forced out. They didn't want him back. He didn't want to come back. So that could be easily a thing. And I don't think that's just a Boudreau thing. He left because he left. I think management was already considering, going with these two guys. And I don't think anybody really expected Hiller to stay there for his whole career if Gibson panned out anyway, and it just so happened that Anderson came good as well. That I think Anderson was more of a surprise. Everybody knew Gibson was going to be such a good goalie. With Winnick, it's not as big a story as the other ones. I don't really know. He's been a good, player. He doesn't, get a lot of points, but he's been a good Anaheim Ducks player, physical guy. Gets in on the penalty kill. But I think he was playing center for us too as well. So and Nate Thompson comes in, so there's no need for him. And the same thing goes for Koivu. I can see Koivu maybe. Him and Solani were friends. I'm sure he heard a lot of what Solani had to say behind the scenes. But you can't really say. Koivu hasn't come out and said anything, and I don't expect him to either.
Yeah, Koivu is probably the one that if Tamu stayed, Koivu probably stays. I mean, not I don't have any inside info on that or anything like that. That's just my perception of that because that like you said they're really good friends. So I think that's kind of the situation with both of them. Though Koivu was kind of going the same route as Solani. He wasn't playing as much ice time. He wasn't scoring as much points. Obviously, I mean, he's on the twilight of his career as well. So I think with him, I don't think he had any. I mean, again, nothing's been said about him having issues with Boudreaux, but I don't think there was any issue with that. Um, and like you said, I think Perot, yeah, I think Kessler came in, and that was the end of it for Perot because now Bruce not only brought him in, he brings in Nate Thompson. He's going to have Raquel hopefully play a lot more time this year. So I think that was more of a positional type thing. And the Hiller thing is it's just the way he played after the All Star break. I think, like you said, when players don't play, they get upset, which is a natural reaction. But I think at the same time, for whatever reason, Hiller wasn't playing as well after that All Star break. I mean, there were certain games, and the fans know, and I know, we would go and watch, and there would be a soft goal let in the beginning of the game, and we would just be like, oh, here we go, and then it seemed like his confidence would go down, and then Boudreaux's confidence would go down in him. So it was kind of a snowball, in my opinion, with Hiller. Don't get me wrong, I like Hiller. I didn't have a problem with him. I mean, I'm sad to see him go. I'm glad we have Gibson and Anderson, but I think Hiller was kind of his own worst enemy at times, Eddie.
Yeah, and I don't really think anybody expected him to stay around either. And we're keep reiterating the fact that if a player is not going to play, he's not going to be happy. And this happens all the time. Obviously, we're covering it with the Ducks. You saw it in Toronto with Reimer when he wasn't playing. He and former Ducks coach in Carlisle, they didn't get along. You're going to see this all the time. And it's not surprising. The Hiller situation didn't, and you're seeing it with because it's Teemu. This is so big, and
Right.
because this is last season. The Hiller situation, it picked up, a bit of flaming behind it. You didn't see a lot of stories about it, but we covered it on the podcast and his comments about Anaheim and everything when he went to Calgary. But it didn't get as much like public and international national news as this Selanne thing is. We're seeing the Selanne thing here and every day, and and it's all the way up here. We didn't really see much of the Hiller thing, so I think it's just because it's Timu, because it's certainly his last year, and because of the comment saying I would have stayed if we had any other coach. It's picked up too much steam, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down right now.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you. Like I mean, I rather Tamu have been honest than come out and just BS us like a lot of other players do, because I can't stand when they ask someone a question and then they just give a total bland answer. I just it's irritating because we don't get to see what's going on. But on the flip side of that, I think there are times that when you do make certain comments, there's just certain comments like that quote, because that's the one that blew up everything, that should be maybe held back. I mean, I don't blame Tamu for disagreeing with Boudreau on his ice time. I get where he's coming from. I see Boudreau's side of it too, trying to do what's best for the team, and basically what's Tamu's role. And like I said before, I thought more time on the power play, but kept the regular ice time the same. That's just my take on it. I kind of have a split decision on it, and I'm not really upset at Boudreau or Tamu. I just think certain times we say certain, not we, but players say certain things, and like you said, the media just grabs onto it and runs with it. And I think that's where you have to be a little careful. It's okay to be honest and give us a little bit more insight, because we all love that and we don't get to see it. It's just choose your words carefully, Eddie.
Yeah, and I'm not picking any sides either. I think Boudreaux's doing his job. There's never going to be everybody's going to get along with the coach. There's probably rarely been one who does. I just don't think it's extremely necessary. I get that he wants to put out a book. That's understanding. It's fair enough. But some of the things that were said or have rumored to have been said, because we don't know for sure. It's just translated. But I think some of them didn't really have to be said. I think he would have known that some of these things were going to get picked up, and the stature of the player he is, and what the time he's releasing it, where not much is going on. This is going to be a big story, and I think this would be a big story anytime. I just don't think it's the best time. I don't think it's going to affect many people in the locker room that much. I'm sure everybody already knew. I'm sure Solani's voiced his opinion behind the scenes, with the players that obviously doesn't like Boudreaux, but I just don't think it's really. I don't think any time's a good time to put something out like this. But right before training camp, you putting on an impression on some of the young guys who haven't met Boudreaux yet. I don't think it's the best time to really put this out. Out with the media.
Yeah, and going forward, that's what some of the other people basically asked me is, okay, let's roll into the season now, get going. Is this going to cause any problems between the players and Boudreaux? And I don't really think that's going to be any problems. Getzlaf had been mentioned in this whole thing as well, and the issue with him was Tamu was like, well, Getzlaf should have spoke up more for me, but Getzlaf, said, yeah, I agree with Tamu as far as him being frustrated, and I see why he's frustrated, but you also have to pick your battles with the coach, and I think being a captain, I think that's a very smart approach. I mean, you have to realize all the players' concerns, but at the same time, you can't voice all of them and create too much, turmoil or disagreement amongst who's playing what, where, when, and why. Because, as we know, the coach is the coach. They're going to decide. You're going to bring up stuff to them, and you got to work it out together. And that's just sports in general. And I think that this roster going forward is going to be fine. I think all the fans need to take a deep breath and relax. Yeah, this is a big story. Yeah, Boudreau, Teemu, and all this comments in his book and everything. But we got to look forward now. Go to the next season. The players are going to be fine. The team's going to be fine. Let's get back to the task of beating the Kings, beating the Blackhawks, beating everybody basically, especially in the West, and get us back where we need to be. Because for me, I think we mentioned on the podcast, Boudreau got his contract extension. So it's time to go forward, Eddie. It's time to get past this, go into the playoffs, and just kick some other teams' butts. That's the plain and simple. We got to go forward and do that, Eddie.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just one thing I'm kind of interested to see is what kind of bearing this has on Teemu's ceremony night. What's gonna happen with that now? If there's gonna be any unnecessary drama with that night, if I'm sure he doesn't have to meet with Boudreaux, but there's obviously gonna be some tension around there that the fans are gonna all know about now.
Yeah, that is a good point, Eddie. I mean, I think going forward next season, everything will be fine. But you're right. Come that game, and like we said before that game, they'll have the ceremony. It'll be interesting to see what will happen. I don't. I think they'll be fine. I think Tamo will be there, obviously, and Boudreaux will be there, and they'll shake hands, and everything will be fine. He made other comments too, saying that he's not bitter. I mean, and obviously you can interpret some of the comments the way you want to interpret it for everybody listening. I mean, some people think he is bitter. Some people said Tamu's a crybaby. I heard all this stuff, and I don't really agree with all those comments. I think, was he frustrated and maybe some of the comments weren't necessary? Sure, of course. I don't think he's crybabying at all. I think he's just airing out his frustrations. Whether or not he should have or not, that's a whole other topic, which we've pretty much gone into. But I think it'll be fine. He's already apologized. He said, that he still respects Boudreau. He just disagreed on his role with the team, and I think that's what it came down to. I just think that some of the words, as we've said, have been just blown out of proportion, and everybody's going, "Hey, it's Teemu," and let's throw the story out there and create the viralness of this issue.
Yeah, and I agree with you that I think we should all just move on, get to the season, kind of put this behind us, and not keep it going and make it a bigger story than it needs to be. We've got some other news coming in, some better news. Devontae Smith-Pelly was finally signed, so it'll be nice to see him with the team. We finally got all our contract issues worked out, and he's going to be part of the Ducks starting lineup next year.
Yeah, he got the 2-year deal, 800,000 each year. It's finally up there on capgeek.com. If for those of you out there that don't know, that's where we pretty much get a lot of our information as far as the restricted free agents, unrestricted free agents, their contracts, how much they are. It's a very, very good website. It has all the hockey players on there and what their current deals are with the teams. But yeah, Smith Pelly for 2 more years is a very, very good deal. You and I, Eddie, have talked about the lines at nauseum before on other podcasts and where he'll be. I think initially he's going to be more on the third or fourth line, but and I'm just going by what I said before about the playoffs last year. I wouldn't mind seeing him on that first line if for some reason Heatley doesn't pan out.
Yeah, and we don't have to go too in depth on this again. He had a good 10.19 game season last year. I think he'll move up and down the lineup. I'm just happy he's finally in. We don't have to speculate about his signing anymore, and we've got all the team ready going into. I think we're in the third day of training camp now, so hopefully everything's good to go.
Right, because now the whole team is set. There's no more question because I know a lot of people kept posting messages. Hey, what's going on with DSP? What's going on? What's going on? So that's been resolved. I guess the only disappointing thing that happened recently is we saw that Palmieri and Shea Theodore both got injured. It looks like Theodore hurt his knee and he'll be out at least 4 weeks. Palmieri, it looks like it wasn't as bad. It looks like he might be just done for only a week or two. Eddie, he should be back for the beginning of the season.
Yeah, he's gonna miss a bit of training because it's an ankle sprain, so he won't be able to skate fully. But he might not be back for opening day, but he'll be back definitely. At least the first week or two of the season and ready to go. The Theodore one it isn't a big blow to the Ducks in the NHL, but it sucks for him and trying to get him have a full season under his belt. A knee injury is gonna keep him out for 4 to 6 weeks. So hopefully he's back and he has a good season too. So maybe we'll see him with the Ducks next year.
Yeah, definitely. And some of these little things are going to come up in the preseason. But the Ducks are going to be fine going forward. I think the other bigger story, we didn't really put this out on the blog, but we'll probably put it out the next day or two, is the goalie situation. Eddie, you were reading over some comments about Murray, and what's Murray saying? What's the deal with the Ducks goalies? Who's going to be the main two guys? Because we get a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, recently, I think it was about yesterday, NBC had a small little interview with Bob Murray talking about the goaltending. I'm just going to read a couple quotes here that they had. He said, "We go from having the deepest goaltending everybody's talking about, and now all of a sudden it's to the two kids who are very good players. It's the way it's come about. I'm sure they're up to the task." And then he says, "This is the big thing right here." He says, "I couldn't see Gibby playing in the minors again this year. That made no sense to me. So we're going to run with the two kids, and we'll see how it goes." So that finally, answers the question that I thought for sure Gibson was going to start in the AHL just because of his two-way, but it looks like they've signed LaBarbera to put in the minors and have him come up in case of injury or a guy needs a rest or just not playing well. So I think I'm happy with this for sure. I really wanted Gibson and Anderson to start, and it looks like those are the two they're going to be running with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I heard these comments come out, I was very, very happy because the indications before, like you said, we had heard is okay, it was going to be Anderson number one, the Barber number two, and Gibson in the minors. And to me, I was like, oh, come on, you got to bring Gibson up. And everybody knows that I like Gibson a little bit more than Anderson. That's just me. I like him. But in terms of the team and what's best for the team, because that's been our theme this podcast. Whoever Gibson or Anderson, whoever plays better, I'm happy with either one of them, and I'm really happy that they're number one and number two, Eddie, because regardless, whichever one starts, if they play well, then the Ducks are going to have a great season.
Yeah, and then we just gotta if they're solid, we gotta hope the defense in front of them, the blue line plays well in front of them. Murray, I think, would be the first one to admit that the Ducks don't have a elite defenseman in front of them. But I think, we should be okay, and I'm definitely happy Gibson is gonna be in the lineup, starting from the beginning of the season. I hope we can run with Gibson and Anderson and have no trouble throughout the whole season.
Yeah, definitely. And I know Gibson. I forgot where, but I had seen some quotes. I can't remember what article I was reading, but there were some quotes about Gibson too, and about that Game 7 loss to the Kings, and how he Gibson doesn't blame himself for the entire loss, but he was not happy with his performance, and he had said that he has been using that game for his motivation to come out and play better this year, and that's exactly the type of attitude I want to hear. Is when something happens like that, you're gonna get mad, but not crazy mad, but mad to the point where you turn that into fire and you bring it out in the next season, and you elevate your game. And I will be surprised if he doesn't come out this next season on fire. And we do have a tough decision for Boudreau to make as far as Gibson and Anderson starting in net.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think Anderson's probably the guy who will get the
Right.
initial starting job day one. I think they'll fight though and play an even amount of games. Maybe Anderson around the 50 mark, hopefully, and Gibson around the 30, if not even, or Gibson maybe even take over the starting role. But I think we're definitely in a good spot, and that's been reflected through ESPN. They released the ultimate standings, which is a ranking of all 122 teams from the top four North American leagues in the MLB, NBA, NFL, and NHL. And the Ducks are the top NHL team, and they're ranked second on the whole thing, only behind San Antonio Spurs of the NBA.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. I'm looking here at the article, and just for the fans that don't know, there's some criteria that ESPN goes through, and I'll just kind of read out what these are really quick. They go by coaching, strength of on-field leadership, the fan relations, looking at the courtesy by the players, the coaches, the front office towards the fans, and how the team uses technology to reach them, which we're kind of part of that. But I mean, though we're not the official um, team. The ownership, honesty, loyalty to the core players and the community, uh, the players' effort on the field, stadium experience, quality of the venue, fan friendliness, environment, most bang for the buck, and the title track, championships won or expected within the lifetime of the current fans. And I think that last one is really the key there because many of us, not just because we're Duck fans, we expected to win last year, and I think there's still that air out there, Eddie, that a lot of us have high expectations for the Ducks, and not just for next year, but I would say for the next 5 to 10 years, Eddie.
Yeah, and that was they stated that in there with the addition of Ryan Kessler that we're on the anybody's short list for Stanley Cup favorites in this year coming up. They also cited some of the things that we do outside the arena that they have such a affordable ticket price, and I think the average ticket price they had was like $42, and the total cost per game is $63, and that's among the lowest in the league, which kind of explains why we're so high, and especially we're second in the category for bang for your buck among every team, second among every team out of the four major leagues in North American sports is pretty good. So it shows how well run the Ducks are, and it's nice to see, especially in a franchise that's in a non-traditional hockey market, that ESPN kind of gives us some love when the NHL power rankings don't.
Oh, I know and that's everybody. We all crack up about that too. On Twitter and Facebook, social media, everything. We always crack up about the NHL rankings. How we're always, maybe we'll be number five in there, number four, and then the Ducks will have one loss, and all of a sudden we're not even in the top five, which is it's just a crack up to me. But ESPN giving us the love. But it's a good point about the ticket prices, and I think you can really speak to this, Eddie, being in Canada with the Toronto prices, because some people ask me about season tickets, and I am by far no means a person that makes a lot of money, but the Ducks season tickets in the 400 section are not that unreasonable. You can get tickets for one seat, in the top level for the whole year, depending on if you're on the lower part, top part, anywhere from like 700 to 900 bucks for the entire season. And I mean, I think you might know more about this, but I know the prices in Toronto for tickets like that is what, twice that, three times that?
Yeah, it's about three times. ESPN put it on here too. Toronto was actually ranked last out of all of the teams, and last in a few categories. They're last in affordability, last in bang for your buck, which kind of puts the wins per year put together with how much the fans pay, and then they're second last in title track, and I think that's fair. Toronto is one of the most popular sports teams in the league, but the reason they can charge so much is in Toronto, a huge base of the tickets that get bought are corporate ticket buyers. So they just jack the prices up to $122 on average, which is a ridiculous. That's three times the amount for the Ducks tickets, and that's why they're so far down. It's actually 34% higher than any other team in the NHL, which is just ridiculous. Hopefully they're going in the new direction for them at least. That they brought in Brendan Shanahan and a couple other guys, but yeah, it really shows the huge difference between a team like Toronto and how they cater towards the fans and affordability and everything, and where the Ducks are, almost on a complete opposite ends.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. And that's why I tell people, it's not, some of the people that I know that aren't really hockey fans, and I tell them, I go, look, let's go to a game, check it out. You'll like the sport. It doesn't cost that much for being in the California market to go to a game. Um, the only complaint that I've really heard from the Ducks has just been the food variety there. I know that the Ducks are getting Wahoos there, which is good this coming seasons. And I know I've talked to some of the Ducks management about some of the food stuff, and I know they're improving some of those things. But that's the only drawback I've heard is the food selection. Really, going to a Ducks game, I don't really hear, I haven't heard at least anything else that other people have complained to me about. So I mean, if that's your only issue, then I think we're doing pretty good, Eddie.
Yeah, and lastly, moving on, we've got a couple, little tidbits from around the NHL. According to the NHL's website yesterday, Kessler got a standing ovation during his first appearance at training camp, which is was pretty funny. I'm sure some people listening here might have been there, which is pretty cool to see. Obviously, everybody's happy he's here, and it's nice that they've gave him a warm welcome on his first day in Anaheim.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm looking forward to him coming and playing. It's going to be an exciting time going forward with Kessler in the center position. I know some people um, still in Vancouver, some people look down on him a little bit here or there for whatever reason, but I think he's going to be fine in our system, and I think he's going to see a lot of ice time, like Boudreau had mentioned on that second line. And I think it's just gonna be an overall positive thing for us, Eddie.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm happy training camp starting up. There's only a couple weeks left until the season starts. I know everybody's ready to go, so I can't wait. And I'm excited to see how we do, and I hope we start off well because you don't want to start off bad and get some of these young guys down. So it's gonna be this first few games are gonna be really important for the Ducks.
Oh, definitely. And another thing for all the people following us that I need to mention too is yesterday or the day before I gave away some tickets to one of the Ducks pre-games on Twitter because I wasn't able to make it. So I will be giving away some more preseason games this year for people. Um, we also still have our contest going for the opening night, which we're almost got all the votes in, and we'll announce the winner shortly through the blog. And we'll also have other game tickets available too. I got access to more tickets, so we'll have those for the fans. We'll probably put up a little thing on the website for people to look at. I'll probably do like a month-to-month thing. So for the fans, just check that out. There'll be some tickets out there that'll be either given away or for sale. And the for sale ones are only for face value. I'm not trying to make any kind of money or anything like that. That's just games that, due to my schedule, I go to probably about 90% of the games, but there's always a handful I can't go to. And I also got my hands on a few extra tickets this year from my family members. So that'll, translate out to our fans, and hopefully more of you out there that either don't go or maybe only go to a couple can go to some more games in the future. All right, and that's all we have time for this week. Like I said, continue to follow us. We'll have some more tickets out there, more stories coming to you, and we'll keep you up to date on all the news on the Ducks. And see you next time.
The Anaheim Ducks are the Stanley Cup champions.